Once again, it is good to see everyone here together. It is good that we can come together freely on this first day of the week, as we do every first day of the week, as Christians come together to worship in spirit and in truth. We are spiritually minded people. We are thinking spiritually, and we are worshiping according to God's Word. We have been continuing in the book of Mark for some time now. And we find ourselves in chapter 6, verses 1 to 6, which is a very interesting passage as we look at this, when familiarity breeds contempt. This would not be one of those positive sermons. We talked about a bit this morning in our class in 1 John. The Bible is balanced. God is the God of love and justice. And when we look at these things, many times we have certain sermons that may be more on a positive note. Some may be on a more negative note as far as things that we must be aware of. You've likely heard this saying before: familiarity breeds contempt. It means the better we know people, the more likely we are to find fault with them. The better we know people, the more likely we are to find fault with them. If you know someone very well, or if you experience something a lot, you might stop having respect for that person or that event. The more you know something or someone, the more you start to find faults and dislike things about it or about them. We've all experienced it in different ways. We may have been on the receiving end, we may have been on the delivering end. But we all have probably found ourselves in this situation. We find an example of this in our text. And it's an example that we do well to consider. When Jesus returned to his hometown in Mark 6, beginning in verse 1, they went out from there and came to his own country, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? And what wisdom is this which is given to him, that such mighty works are performed by his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they were offended at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, in his own house." Now he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. Then he went about the villages in a circuit, teaching. The town of Nazareth, where he had been brought up. Let's look a bit about that in the book of Luke. Luke 4, verses 16 to 24 gives a broader example, a broader picture of this using the synoptic gospels. So he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. And he was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." Then he closed the book and gave it back to the attendant, sat down. The eyes of all who were in the synagogue were fixed on him. He began to say to them, "Today, the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." So all bore witness to him and marveled at the gracious words which proceeded out of his mouth. And they said, "Is this not Joseph's son?" He said to them, "You will surely say this proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself. Whatever we have heard done in Capernaum, do also here in your country." Then he said, "Assuredly I say to you, no prophet is accepted in his own country." As illustrated in our text, allowing familiarity to breed contempt can be to one's disadvantage. And that's what we want to glean from this, so we don't find ourselves in that disadvantage. For example, when familiarity breeds contempt, the message is not received. We see that in our text. Jesus' countrymen, they took offense. At first, they were impressed by his teaching. Verse 2, when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue. Many hearing him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What wisdom is this which is given to him, that such mighty works are performed by his hands?" They were impressed. People of Nazareth knew Jesus. They knew him as a carpenter and the son of a carpenter, son of Mary, the brothers and sisters. But the moment he spoke critically, they took offense. They became angry. Luke 4, verses 23 to 28. He said to them, "You will surely say this proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself. Whatever we have heard done in Capernaum, do also here in your country.' Then he said, 'Assuredly, I say to you, no prophet is accepted in his own country. But I tell you truly, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a great famine throughout all the land. But to none of them was Elijah sent, except to Zarephath, in the region of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. And many lepers were in Israel the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian.' So all those in the synagogue, when they heard these things, they were filled with wrath." He was speaking critically. They attempted to kill him. Verses 29 to 30 in Luke 4, and rose up and thrust him out of the city. And they led him to the brow of the hill on which their city was built, that they might throw him down over the cliff. Then passing through the midst of them, he went his way. Led Jesus to say, and back in Mark 6 and verse 4, Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house." He was speaking critically, and they took offense. Because of familiarity, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect him as the prophet whom he was. Jesus limited his teaching. Because of their reaction, Jesus limited his teaching. Their offense led to his leaving and returning to Capernaum, thus depriving themselves of further teaching by the Son of God. The Son of God was in their midst. He spoke critically. They were offended, and they ran him off, depriving themselves. Remember what Jesus had told his disciples earlier in Mark chapter 4, verses 23 to 25. "If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear." Then he said to them, "Take heed what you hear." Oh, but if it's critical, don't listen to that. He said, you take heed to what you hear. With the same measure you use it, will be measured to you, and to you who hear, more will be given. For whoever has, to him more will be given. But whoever does not have, even what he has, some translators say, even what he thinks he has, will be taken away from him. Because of their contempt, they lost access to more learning of God's will. How tragic that is. They lost access to more learning. Might we be guilty of the same today? Could we find ourselves in the same mindset, the same situation today? We can easily develop familiarity today. And familiarity is not inherently sinful. We're talking about familiarity that breeds contempt. It doesn't have to breed contempt. It did in the text that we're looking at, so we're looking at that aspect of it. So when we look at it, we can easily develop familiarity today with those teaching the Word of God. Well, he no longer impresses me. He preaches and teaches about things I don't want to hear. He's meddling. He's talking about things that just better be just left alone. Don't bring it up. I just don't like him anymore. Sometimes it results in sowing discord. Rally the troops. Well, that's what they did in the text. They rallied the troops. We don't like him. Easily develop familiarity today with the message of the word itself. I've heard that many times before. I've heard it so many times, but it didn't mean anything then. It don't mean anything now. I've heard it so many times, but obviously it don't work. I'm not going to change no matter how many times I hear it. I'll just excuse myself from hearing it. I'll get out of the range where I can't hear it. Do we allow our familiarity to breed contempt? No longer respecting those we know well, taking them for granted, no longer appreciating the significance of the Word of God. If so, then we will cut ourselves off from its powerful message. Stop attending. Well, I might still attend, but I ain't going to listen. I'll go somewhere else. That way I can't hear. I still get my check mark. I'm just going to hang out. I'm going to enjoy the fellowship of what I want to do whenever I want to fellowship, but then I ain't going to do none of the rest. All of that's contempt. It's nothing more than contempt. Leads to another disadvantage experienced when familiarity breeds contempt. The blessings aren't received. Now, what happened in the text? We see that was the result. Jesus' countrymen didn't believe him. It's caused Jesus to marvel. Remember, they even tried to kill him. Because of familiarity, they were unwilling to believe what he was saying. Jesus limited his miracles. He had that ability. He limited his miracles. Mark states that he could do no mighty work there, verse 5. Matthew says it was because of their unbelief. Matthew 13, verse 58. Now, he did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. It wasn't that he couldn't. Certainly, we know that he could, but because of their unbelief, he didn't. It wasn't Jesus that couldn't do miracles. He healed a few. Verse 5, now he could do no mighty works there was because of their unbelief, not because of his unbelief. He certainly not for that reason, not because of lack of power, lack of ability. He laid his hands on a few of the sick, healed them. Where people would not believe, he wouldn't do a great work for them. Well, if they're not going to believe, that's what the miracles were for. Was to confirm the Word of God. So if they're not going to believe it, then what difference does it make whether miracles are done? Whether he's doing mighty works, they've chosen. They're not going to believe it. No matter what. Such unbelief as this has immense consequences for evil. It closes the channels, the opportunities to receive that grace and mercy through obedient faith, so that maybe only a trickle gets through. Maybe none at all. Because of their contempt, they lost access to receiving more blessings. Might we experience the same? We can easily develop familiarity and contempt towards such things as baptism. Well, the Lord's Supper. I've been doing it every Sunday my whole life. Just breeds contempt. This familiarity, it can breed contempt. It doesn't have to. Again, we're looking at the aspect of the text we see in Mark chapter 6, where it breeds contempt. It doesn't have to. But in some, the Lord's Supper, the Word of God, prayer, assembling together. Oh, it don't really matter. If we come together, we can be spread out. We can do whatever. Now it's becoming prevalent today. I can just stay at home. And I'll watch a live stream, and I can call that worship. Familiarity breeds contempt. And that's what that mindset shows. Even the blood of Christ, counting it as just a common thing. The Hebrews writer spoke of it in Hebrews 10, verse 29, of how much worse punishment do you suppose? You start thinking about how much worse punishment, how much punishment can we suppose? When we think about that, well, will he be thought worthy who has trampled the Son of God underfoot? Counted the blood of the covenant, what it took for that blood to flow, and counted the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified. Well, it's just a common thing. It's just like dirt on the ground. It's common. Insulted the Spirit of grace. Such contempt will close the channels of grace and mercy, for we will not emphasize the importance of baptism for the remission of sins. Oh, nobody wants to hear that anymore, so we just won't talk about it anymore. That's familiarity breeding contempt. Such contempt will close the channels. We will not value the observance of the Lord's Supper as a communion with Christ. 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 16, the cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? Because we're familiar with that, could it breed contempt? To where it's just a common thing. All people's watching, so I got to do it. It's just, I'm thinking about something else while I'm doing it. That familiarity, it can breed contempt. It doesn't have to. We come around the table and count it a blessing that we can commune together, that we can come together and we can see each of us proclaiming Christ as the Son of God. Such contempt, it closes channels for we won't feed on the Word of God that we might grow thereby. 1 Peter 2 and verse 2, this is an apostolic command. As newborn babes, desire. That's an emphatic, understood pronoun, you. You desire. Me, we, Christians, who's written to? Christians, desire, yearn for, long for, desire the pure milk of the Word that you may grow thereby. That's an apostolic command that we grow. We in the church, we talk about the apostolic doctrine, the commands and the inferences and the examples and all. Well, have we grown so familiar that this bred contempt? That's a command. Do we desire it? Such contempt, it closes channels, for we will not utilize prayer in order to receive mercy, grace, and peace. Hebrews 4, verses 14 and 15. The Hebrews writer says, seeing then that we have a great high priest. Do we see that? Do we think about that? You have to think about that in a spiritual nature. We think we have a great high priest. And all of the reminders that we learn from the Old Testament about what a high priest did and the role that he played. And he was a high priest until death. And now we have a great high priest who never dies, who has passed through the heavens. Jesus, the Son of God, he's our high priest. We don't have somebody like Aaron or no offense, not that Aaron. The Aaron, Moses' brother, Aaron. The Aaronic priesthood. We don't have physical men who have their faults and all, and the different high priests that came through. And then as we heard the high priest in the days of Jesus, you had Annas and Caiaphas. Not those high priests. We have Jesus, the Son of God. Are we familiar with that? Are we familiar to the point that it breeds contempt? Are we familiar with that we're excited about that, we're encouraged by that? Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. That's our responsibility. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses. That's a double negative. That means he can sympathize. He does. But was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. So we have a high priest that we can follow to the nth degree. Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7 says, be anxious for nothing. Be anxious for nothing. Again, emphatic, understood, you. Christians, be anxious for nothing. This is an apostolic command. In everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Contempt will close the channels, for we'll not assemble as often as we can. Why do we assemble? To stir up love and good works, Hebrews 10, verses 24 and 25. If we hold it in contempt because we're familiar with it, we do it all the time. I don't want to go. I don't have to go. You can't tell me I've got to go. You especially can't tell me I got to go twice. Is that not contempt? Is that not familiarity? Breeding contempt? Let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another. So much the more as you see the day approaching. Could contempt bred by familiarity maybe explain dull spiritual lives? When the people of Nazareth allowed their familiarity with Jesus to breed contempt, they deprived themselves of a great opportunity. Jesus chose to take his message and his blessings elsewhere. A similar tragedy can befall us today. We can judge ourselves unworthy of eternal life and thus deprive ourselves of blessings that we would otherwise receive. Consider Acts 13 and verse 46. This example, then Paul and Barnabas grew bold and said it was necessary that the word of God should be spoken to you first. But since you reject it, Jews, judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life. Behold, we turn to the Gentiles. Could we find ourselves following the same example of the Jews in the first century? So where we reject it because of familiarity, we judge ourselves unworthy because of familiarity, breeding contempt. So what do? Well, the secret, and it's really not a secret, is to pay close attention to the words of Jesus and his apostles. Any familiarity will produce only greater blessings and not contempt. Prayer will certainly help. Mark 4, verse 24, then he said to them, take heed what you hear. With the same measure you use it, it will be measured to you. Okay, well, I'm measuring this. I'm familiar with the Lord's Supper, but it still doesn't really mean that much to me. Okay, then the same measure is going to be measured to you. Well, yeah, assembly, I'll come when I got to. I'm gonna come one time. Forget about class. I ain't got to do that. I can't get up in time on a Sunday. I can't get up I can get up earlier than that, and I can go to work every day, but I can't get up on Sunday and make it to class. But I'm not gonna. I can make it for one lesson, one sermon, okay, but I ain't coming back. Okay, with the same measure you use it, it will be measured to you. It doesn't change because of familiarity. And to you who hear, more will be given. We'll end with Psalm 119, verse 18. Is this our prayer? Open my eyes, that I may see wondrous things from your law. Or do we hold that in contempt? Written to Christians, as Christians thinking about this, those outside of Christ, they really don't have that familiarity. They may be beginning and can if they obey the gospel. We look at obeying the gospel as hearing the gospel, becoming familiar with it. And at that point, we'll determine what you do with it. Those in the first century, those at Pentecost, they were hearing the gospel preached by Peter. Some were cut to the heart, gnashing their teeth. Some were cut to the heart and said, men and brethren, what must we do? So hearing the gospel, becoming familiar with, believing the evidence therein, repenting of all sins, having that understanding, familiar with our sins and what that means to God. Is that going to breed contempt, but I want to keep on doing it? Or will it breed that understanding of godly sorrow? that produces repentance that leads to salvation. Making the good confession that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, based on the evidence that we've become familiar with, not to hold in contempt, but to hold it as a treasure, as a blessing, that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and He can be my high priest. Being immersed for the remission of sins by the authority of Christ, because it's absolutely essential to be added to the church, to come in contact with the blood of Christ. Are we familiar with that? Do we hold it in contempt? Well, you don't really have to be baptized. Many in the world believe that nonsense. Because the devil's out there deceiving them. You're familiar with it, but you don't have to do it. But we as Christians, we find it as a blessing, as a command. We get to put away the sins. We get to bury that old man of sin, and God's going to raise up a new creature to walk and keep on walking in the newness of life. That's a blessing. We should be familiar with it. Continue to think of it as a blessing. If you haven't done that, you're not a Christian. If God's not raised you up as a new creature, you're not a Christian. But you can be, and we would love to help you with that. For those of us who have we become familiar with more and more of the Scripture where we hold it in contempt, or to where we hold it as a blessing and we want to know more and more so that we can grow thereby? If for any reason we can help in any way, please come as together we stand and sing.